Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward, and this is Face to Face. Our guest this week is actress Kawennáhere Devery Jacobs. Devery is Mohawk from Kawennáhere Mohawk territory. Devery's big break came at Jeff Barnaby's Rhymes for Young Ghouls, a film that garnered her a nomination for Best Actress in a Leading Role at the 2014 Canadian Screen Awards. Most recently, Devery has starred in the hit shows Reservation Dogs and Rutherford Falls. Devery, thanks so much for being with us here on the show. Congrats on Rutherford Falls, on Reservation Dogs. Busy year for you.
Yes, and Yamogo, thank you so much for having me.
Let's maybe start with the show. We're a bit behind here in Canada. I think there's maybe 3 episodes that are available. I've only seen one myself so far, but what's been the reaction that you've been getting from Reservation Dogs? It's been overwhelming, the outpouring of love and support, and also people just feeling like finally we are beginning to see ourselves represented on screen. And so I don't know, I've never seen like Native Twitter and Indigenous Instagram and Facebook behave like this. It's just been such a huge project and one that I have rarely seen or never have seen Indigenous people take up space in mainstream media like that before. So it's been overwhelming and also really great and everything in between. Obviously the hype in Canada has been huge and everybody's like trying to offer to buy VPNs in the States to watch
I know,
it.
my family has been like illegally streaming, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna turn a blind eye as long as you give it a legal stream on Disney Plus when it comes out.
Right, which is what I had to wait for myself, but obviously it must be doing good in the States too, because it's already coming back for a 2nd season.
Yes, they renewed it for season 2, which is huge, and I heard from Sterling maybe an hour before they announced it. Sterling Harjo is the showrunner and creator, and the whole series is loosely based on his upbringing. And he messaged me, he let me know that he's like, hey, the ratings have been so great and incredible. They weren't expecting to announce a season 2 at this point, but it was so good that they just went for it.
Yeah, it's pretty quick. Like I said, we didn't even have 1 episode in Canada yet, and it's already, we're on to season 2. Riley Yesno, who was on the show, she recently did an interview with you as well, and she wrote that as a former Res kid, that Reservation Dogs is a show that she could only have dreamed of growing up. Do you kind of feel that way yourself?
Absolutely. I feel like Reservation Dogs would have changed everything for me growing up in Kawennáhere, and fortunately I was raised in a community that had such a strong sense of pride of Mohawk culture and being where I'm from. But that I never saw that on screen before. So I don't know. It would have changed everything from my feelings of self-worth, what I thought was possible in the film industry. I actually pursued something else in schooling for a career because I didn't think that being an actor or being in film and television would be sustainable or even viable as a career option. And so now with a project like Reservation Dogs, with projects like Rutherford Falls, it's proving to us that we are worthy and that we have always been worthy and valid, and the industry should be so lucky to have our stories. And it's also proving to non-Indigenous audiences that we're here to stay and we're only scratching the surface.
Were there, actresses, actors, people in the industry when you were growing up, or shows that you watched that you were like, that stuck out with you, that you were actually seeing people represented?
I knew of a few people. I mean, there's a huge talent pool coming out of my community. Actresses like Alex Rice, Ganyet Dio, Horn. And so at that point, they weren't working full-time. Like, we're kind of like, how do I say that? Like, we're not of the same generation, but I saw them growing up, and it wasn't necessarily on a mainstream level, and I also was like, that's amazing that they're doing that and inspiring, but like I didn't foresee for myself that I would be able to carry a project or that I would be able to do that. And honestly, a lot changed for me with Rhymes for Young Ghouls, back in 2013 when that came out, and it was that role that had proved to me, that to myself, that I was able to do this.
You talk about the other generations, and many of those generations are all coming together on Reservation Dogs, from what I see anyways, in photos and stuff. It looks like there's a lot of cameos from people over many generations, and all the people behind the scenes as well, directors, writers, all that. Is this, how would you describe this project behind the scenes?
I would describe Reservation Dogs behind the scenes as like communal, fun. I don't know if anybody follows Sterling Harjo on Instagram, but if they watched his Instagram stories while we were filming the season, he would know that it was a lot of fun. And I'm surprised that we managed to get work done with the amount of fun that we were having. But yeah, we had an opportunity to work with legendary Indigenous actors from many different productions, and it was such a privilege to be able to work with them and to bring that film history in and also show that we are modern people. I know that as many people as there have been who've worked on Reservation Dogs, there are even more who have been fighting for decades to have our stories be represented on screen. And I stress this has to be at the beginning, because we have so many more stories to tell, but it does feel really good to be able to celebrate Reservation Dogs in this story with our crew.
When I mentioned to you, we had Michael Grey Eyes on the show recently, who we all remember from way back, with the name is escaping me now, and I just love the movie. I still watch it all the time. Dance Me Outside.
Everybody's childhood crush.
Yeah. And he's also in Rutherford Falls, another movie that has, Indigenous showrunners, writers, actors. And he said that right now is a significant time. Do you think that it is a significant time?
I think this is absolutely a significant time in film history and television history for Indigenous peoples in Turtle Island. I've never encountered it before, and it's reminiscent of looking to the Black community and what they've been able to accomplish in the film industry. It feels like we're having kind of a moment for the first time, and we're not only recognizing ourselves, but now widespread audiences and non-Indigenous audiences are recognizing our hard work as well.
We've had some people on the show who were big actresses and stuff, and said that they had some real difficulties with the role that they were put into after a show or a movie blows up, that you're kind of this go-to person for this and that it can be overwhelming. Is that something that you've had to deal with?
I think that's one of the hardships of being one of the firsts, where everybody wants their experience to be recognized, because everybody's story is valid, and we should see completely different iterations of what it means to be Indigenous from specific communities and where we're from, our varied lives that we live. I've found it challenging because I want to see those stories, and also at the same time I can't necessarily be everything to everyone. All I can do at the end of the day is be true to the character that I'm playing and their humanity, and I can't represent more than that when I'm working in that moment. I just have to tell this human story. So I think it's finding the balance and between that, but also making sure that we have so many more Indigenous projects as well, and having decision makers and funding bodies and networks hold positions of power filled by Indigenous people, so that we can see so many more of our stories, so that this one or two projects aren't the end-all be-all for Native television.
Much more to talk about here. We just have to step aside for a quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on Face to Face. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is Devery Jacobs, and maybe let's take some steps backwards and a little bit about how you first got involved in acting.
I grew up in Kawennáhere, but I didn't have a moment in my career where I was like, oh, now I know I want to be an actor and it's all come together for me. It was just something that was always there. I used to make really embarrassing home videos with my sister and would direct them and act in them. And I was also a part of the Turtle Island Theater Company in my community, where my first role was a Munchkin in The Wizard of Oz. But I didn't think that it was realistic at all. But I started auditioning for projects and was looking out for them, and my first role was when I was 13. But it's been, I don't know, it's like, it's been a journey, I want to say, in my career, and it's something that I've always known that I wanted to do, something I just didn't think was possible.
Part of that journey, I watched an interview with you that was quite a few years back, and you spoke in the interview about the impact your family had in your acting. Can you tell us a bit about the importance of your family and maybe even your community in helping get you to where you are today?
Definitely. I mean, my mom was a huge support in seeing that I was passionate about acting, and then would drive me to every single audition when I was young. And also, when I had auditioned for Rhymes for Young Ghouls, I read the character of Ayla, and that was the first role that I had worked in a live-action project with an Indigenous writer-director, and everything sunk in for me. But the character Ayla was really reminiscent of my mom. And also, having grown up in my community and being surrounded by my fellow theater actors at the Turtle Island Theater Company, and also just being immersed in that was something that absolutely grounded me in who I am, and that's always been the place that I've worked from. Growing up, there wasn't a huge amount of support for the arts in my community. It was kind of like, if it's not hockey or lacrosse or wrestling, then it's not really paid attention to or necessarily celebrated. And there was a little bit of crab and bucket and some bullying that I had experienced growing up because I wanted to act. But when Rhymes for Young Ghouls came back to my community, because it shot in Kawennáhere, 5 minutes from my parents' house, and we got to have my auntie be a background performer and a whole bunch of community members be a part of the film, I think the community understood more of what this industry could be, and that we have such a legacy of storytellers. And from that point on, I felt very much embraced by Kawennáhere and my community, and also my family and the work that I do.
Do you think things are changing a bit? We often hear that, that sports is that's the be-all, end-all when you're young too. That's the way to find, better yourself or what have you. Do you think things are changing, seeing more representation on screen for young people?
I absolutely think that things are changing, and there's also such a stress on mental health and making sure that we're taking care of ourselves, we're taking care of each other and our community members, especially with what's been happening for the past 2 years, leaning on each other and being stuck at home. And also in light of everything being discovered with residential schools, and I think there's been such a stress on making sure that we're okay and taking care of ourselves. And from then, I've seen a huge change even in my own community when it comes to accepting queer folks and talking about queerness and talking about our feelings and making sure we're healing instead of staying in that negative way.
We've touched on Rhymes for Young Ghouls a few times, Jeff Barnaby's film, but that was one of your big first ones, I guess. How did that movie change your career?
That movie changed everything for me. I thought that I was going to go on the path of being a counselor, and I was studying something else, and I happened to see the audition for this, and it really created a fork in my path. It was kind of here was the path where I was going to live in my community, and I wasn't going to act, but then this project came along, and I knew that I couldn't do anything else because I love film and TV too much. So it really did change everything for me. I think this whole moment of Indigenous storytellers coming up is actually coming from ourselves. It isn't even coming from the industry yet. It's this need for us to be able to share our stories and for them to reverberate. And so looking at projects like Rhymes for Young Ghouls and like Blood Quantum and Rutherford Falls, I think they're long overdue, and Rhymes honestly felt like it was before its time, where audiences had an appreciation for that type of storytelling, and the fact that it's lived on and is continually taught in universities and is still talked about, and I think that goes to show that there is such an appetite for Indigenous storytelling.
All this excitement around Rutherford Falls Reservation Dogs, yet these are American shows. They're in the U.S., which is good because that's where the money is and the eyes and everything. But do you think there's a reason why we're not seeing these shows on Canadian television development in Canada?
I think that there's been efforts to do that, but there have been setbacks and there's different reasons why it hasn't necessarily been seen on the same scale. I think films coming out of Canada, even though it's funny because I'm like, we're all Indigenous to Turtle Island. It's like, I don't know that I necessarily consider myself Canadian. I consider myself Mohawk. I'm like, we're on both sides of the border. But I find north of this border that there are a lot of films by Indigenous storytellers, even this past year at TIFF with Night Raiders and Wildhood, or the different, like, just an abundance of filmmakers coming out of this country and of this territory. And whereas on the state side, it's seeming that it's more television focused.
Were there, writers or directors, actors, actresses that you looked up to when you were young, I guess we could say? You're still kind of young, but looked up to or that helped you along the way?
I would say that it's been mostly filmmakers and writers who have helped me along the way and fought for me to get the roles that I have when certain funding bodies or networks necessarily didn't want me to. But I've definitely taken influence and also mentorship from a lot of people that I've seen and have kind of had to learn on the ground as I've gone.
Devery, more to talk about here. We just have to step aside for one more quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on Face to Face. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is Devery Jacobs, who has been on quite a tear lately, I guess you could say. The pandemic has slowed a lot of people down, but you don't seem to have slowed down any.
I really didn't think that the pandemic would be the year that my career took off, but here we are, and I'm just grateful to have been able to work. I know a lot of people haven't been able to do that, but it's definitely been exciting and a time of my career which I'm very grateful for.
Do you feel like things have kind of taken off? I mean, we're talking about Rhymes for Young Ghouls, that's 7 years
It's a number of years ago.
Yeah, and to be nominated back then for basically the Canadian Oscar. All these years later, do you feel like now is the time that things are taking off?
I do. After I had been nominated for Rhymes, I was like, that's it, my life's gonna change. I moved to New York and like nothing really happened, and what I didn't realize was my experience on that set with Indigenous storytellers was actually the exception. And when I had gone out into the world, it was a lot of Pocahontas type auditions and roles that I wasn't really interested in, or ones that were in support of a white protagonist story. And so I think it's only fitting that my career is really gaining traction and is escalating while Indigenous storytellers have been granted access to tell our stories. And I'm like, that absolutely makes sense to me why it's happening in that way, because it's community that's supporting each other.
Despite being in this time, I guess, right now, do you still face challenges, or are you expecting to continue to face challenges, as an Indigenous, as a Mohawk?
I mean, I think it's, again, what we were talking about before of like some of the pressures of being one of the first to break through certain glass ceilings is that it's a lot of weight for one person, and for me, I don't want to be the only person. I don't want to break through a glass ceiling and then be one of the only people on the other side. I want to be able to look around and see a whole industry of Nkweihue telling our stories on a scale like this. And so I think I'm more excited for the future to see who is coming up, and not only the Native storytellers who have been trying to kick down these doors for decades, but also young people coming up as well, and just seeing what we're going to do with this.
I guess are you happy to be that person right now though, and the ones that these people are going to look up to?
I take that with a strong sense of responsibility, and it's not something that I carry lightly. I also realize that I'm really fortunate to be able to be benefiting from this moment. The people who have come before us, who've paved this way and are the reason why we're in this industry today, a lot of them didn't get to benefit from having Indigenous storytellers behind the camera, and for our stories to be centered and celebrated. And so I think that's something that I definitely carry with me, and I want to make sure that it's easier for Indigenous youth who want to pursue a career in the film and television industry to come after.
We're talking about your career taking off, and you tweeted out the other day about the Emmys, which will air after this show goes to air, but they're coming up before. What's that going to be like for you presenting at the Emmys?
I'm so nervous. I'm nervous and I'm excited. I'm glad that I'm going to have my fellow Res Dogs with me. We're going to be presenting as a group, and I am excited to be on a stage like that alongside such incredible talent and company.
What advice do you have for youth who are looking to get into this line of business?
I guess advice that I would have would be to do things for yourself. Like, don't act in an audition or write a piece of work because you think that's what the producer wants or you think that's what audiences necessarily want. Find what stories resonate with you and be specific about it. And when you're into the work that you're doing, it's going to reverberate and resonate so much more deeply with audiences. And that was something that I wish I had learned as an actor when I was far younger.
We talked about you got a second season coming up of Reservation Dogs. You got the Emmys, lots on the go. Can you tell us about what might be next for you as well?
I have a show that's going to be coming out in early 2022 that I was a voice actor on. It's based on a video game called Ark, and this is called Ark, the animated series, and I am also in fantastic company in that. I am working alongside Zahn McLaren, who voices one of the characters, as well as Elliot Page, Vin Diesel, Gerard Butler, Michelle Yeoh, David Tennant. Like, it's an unbelievably stacked cast, and I'm still geeking out that I was a part of it, but I do love animated shows and animes, and that's something that I'm excited to be sharing with audiences in the early new year.
Well, that's always exciting when you get to work with people that you respect and look up to, like this interview for some of us here as well. So, Devery, thank you so much for being on the show this week. And wish you all the best going forward as well.
Nyawakkoa, thank you so much.
That is all the time we have for Face to Face this week. You can catch up on all of our episodes over on aptnnews.ca/face-to-face. This episode and all past episodes are also available as podcasts, and you can find those over on the Face to Face page as well. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for being with us this week. We'll see you back here next week.